Good evening, everyone. This is another episode from the Nerdy Playbook. We'll do another episode of where Andrew and myself will talk about certain things we're passionate about. Today will be about the Critical Role Vox Machina Origins book. Before we get in and start talking about the details of that, a couple things. One is that if you are first-time watchers, we also have our D&D campaign that we do weekly, video game streams that we do, and other kind of reviews as well. So check us out on the icons at the bottom of the screen, Nerdy Playbook on YouTube, and Nerdy Playbook on Facebook. Today we'll be not really reviewing Vox Machina Origins. We're just going to talk about it and just kind of mention why it's a really good book. And for anybody here who's watches Critical Role or is trying to get into more of a comic version of any kind of D&D source, why this is a good thing to watch. As you can see, Andrew has it in his hand. We also have the picture on the right. Andrew also has his own podcast that he does. So Andrew, take it away. Where can everybody listen to your podcast? Cool, awesome. We'll also do something similar like that, just like what we're doing today, with difference of more of a podcast that they're doing is we're just doing videos that we just sit around and talk about random nerdy things. We'll have a couple more coming up soon, which is going to be a random top 10s of different anime or just weird random topics we're going to bring up just to chat. But again, today is about Vox Machina. For anybody who doesn't know, Vox Machina is actually the first campaign that Critical Role did. If you are watching this, I'm assuming you know who Critical Role is. It is a group of friends that I personally think got me into D&D. They definitely changed my life as far as D&D. I would not be a DM without Matthew Mercer, who is the DM, Dungeon Master of Critical Role. The book itself is actually taken as a story before the stream. So this is the Vox Machina Origins because the stream was actually started to be done after they were quite a ways into their campaign. This kind of goes over the stories of how they all became a team together, which is pretty cool because it's kind of like something that a lot of DMs don't do. They don't really have kind of a story of how you actually got together. They just kind of have like this is how you guys met kind of like that. So it's pretty cool. To just quick over if you don't know the characters, we have, as you can see from the cover, we have Grog, who is the Goliath Barbarian. We have three half-elves. First is Keyleth, who is our druid. Vax, who is our rogue. Vex, who is our ranger. Percy, who is a human, who is a human fighter gunslinger subclass, and then we have two gnomes, which is Pike, who is our cleric, Scanlan, who is our bard, and then who is actually not on the cover is actually Tiberius, who is a dragonborn sorcerer. So, Andrew, why don't you tell us a little more details about the book itself? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I followed them from the beginning. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I will... Oh, for some reason, I have a person here who says they cannot hear you. I do not know why they cannot hear you. So we will fix that real quick. Thank you for letting us know. We might want to just double check that to make sure we can hear you. Say something. Let's see. Okay. I think I know what the problem is. Thank you, good sir, for letting us know that we do not have his audio appearing for some reason. So we will try to get that in there. Okay, try talking now.
Hey, check 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay,
this is a podcast.
All right, I think that's better. So I apologize that unfortunately a few things were not heard.
Do you want me to start from the synopsis?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Technical problems happen. This is the way it is. But yes, go ahead.
Welcome. Okay, so take 2 of the synopsis of Critical Role Vox Machina Origins, Series 1 and 2. This synopsis was that... Okay, so this is an origin story of how the Vox Machina, the party that was formed by the Critical Role characters, came to be. And I appreciated this book because it is so rooted into the lore and the details and story that was produced by Matthew Mercer and the cast of Critical Role. The personalities that were brought out by the voice cast of that group of Critical Role, it comes out very distinctively. I believe that Jody Houser and Matthew Colville, the writers of this book, did an excellent job capturing the voices and personalities, and that just bringing this world together very naturally, and the pacing was so on point. And the progression was so good. It flowed really well, especially a person that reads comics like all the time. I have the Bam Pow Comic Hour podcast, and we read a lot of hardcover editions, and we talk about those. And to read this like as a complete story of both series 1 and 2, it seems to flow really well together, and just to kind of see that happen.
I agree. Again, this is kind of why you and I do this, because you kind of go from a side where you see it as a comic first, and I see it from the other version first, in this case being the show. And coming from the show side, I fall in love with characters like Scanlan and Vax. For anybody who know me, I actually cosplay as Vax. So he's my favorite. But Scanlan, just like the Scanlan Grog back and forth in the D&D sessions, is, for anybody who's watched Critical Role, I mean, the D&D sessions went up to 115 episodes, roughly about 3 to 6 hours a piece. So that's a lot of chemistry that happens. And these people who wrote this, even though it was already kind of started by Matthew Mercer, they did a really good job as far as the artwork and the actual writing that is point by point exactly shows that attitude of Scanlan before he started kind of having a I wouldn't really say like a code of honor, but kind of like a more self-worth to him.
Yes. He's a kind of a know-it-all,
right?
I would say.
I mean, he still is always like that, but it's kind of like this is at that point where him and Grog are just him and Grog. But you still get that exact Scanlan attitude, which which is for anyone who doesn't know, Scanlan is a gnome and he's a bard, but he's supposed to be that womanizing kind of ladies' man, always drinking, always tries to have the ultimate charisma. Let's see, we got type here. Okay, yeah, so you can kind of see in some of the pictures, the smaller one on there would be Scanlan. I mean, they got that point by point, which is, I mean, honestly, for Scanlan, that's an easy thing. But Scanlan has a few things. He tries to be the ladies' man. He's the bard. And
he's a swashbuckler.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. All the characters are portrayed very well, because you got to think of this as a prequel more than anything else, since the show started off much later, and I'm not quite sure as if what's in this book was actually specifically done in a game that they did themselves, or if it actually started their campaign after they already did it together. But this was done very well, where it shows a version of a D&D campaign where you actually see I believe 4 different stories that all have a similar path. They have nothing to do with each other other than the fact that they're all have their own specific reason to be doing this specific thing, which I don't really want to mention what it is so I don't give away the story, but they all have a similar reason to do something. They happen to be put in a spot where they're all together, and they decide to do a team up.
Right.
And
this was originally published in 2018.
Right, because it was done in separate ones. Right, yeah, it was done themselves. So the way that this specific one is it's a it flows as each specific issue is a chapter. So you just literally just turn the page and you see the cover as actually a page cover, and then you go into that issue. But it flows so perfectly that if you did not know that, you would think that this book was all meant to just be one thing. But yes, personally for me,
just before you go that, what I liked is at the start you get to see the cast and then the progression.
Yep.
of how they are and then where they started.
Right.
And they do that for each like major like every like major story point. They kind of say, hey, this is where we were, this is where we are, this is where we started.
Right. So like at the top of that picture is actually where the group is when they're like level 20 at the end. They got all like their armor on and everything like that, and then you go down to where they are in the book, and then you just see that the story starts off with just Vax and Vex, which for anybody who doesn't know are supposed to be twin half-elves. Really, really cool backstory, but we won't get into that so much. But the so again, on my point, this was it 2015 that Critical Role started airing live. So obviously there was 3 years of them airing before they actually had any kind of books out of their stuff, as far as I understand. So the forgot where I was going with this. So I got to see 3 years of how that stuff worked as just D&D chemistry, and then when it gets put in the books, you got to kind of see how it's going to work out, and it's like perfect. And and I say this to everybody is I'm reading it in bed, or I'm reading it just in a spot, and my wife is sitting right next to me, and all of a sudden I'll just blare out laughing because it's exactly point by point. I just laugh at something Scanlan does, and I swear to God I'm looking like a psycho because I'm randomly laughing out of nowhere, just out of the blue. And it's good. It's good. Any point that you would laugh in here is the exact same stuff you would laugh in the show. They did a really, really good job. And I don't know if it was any easier for these writers to do it or any harder, because Matthew Mercer already had this whole story laid out. Like, it was already set. They just had to write it out. So I don't know if that makes it more difficult or easier for them. But as far as, as far as my side, they couldn't do any better with the story. They did a good job of showing a few issues of where Vax and Vex, why they are there and what their purpose is. You got to see a few issues of what Scanlan and Grog were doing. You got to see a few issues of Keyleth and why she was there, along with eventually shown in Tiberius. And then eventually later on, after they group up, you eventually see Pike and Percy eventually show up. And the reason why you don't see them right away is kind of a thing you got to read in the book. But they do a really good job of individually jumping between different groups. And then you can already see where this is going, because they all kind of have a similar, not objective, but they're constantly each crossing each other's paths without knowing it. So it's a really cool setup that they got for themselves. And for me,
like, I would say, real quick, these characters themselves individually or in small groups could not accomplish the things that they do in this book without forming this party.
Oh, definitely.
Right. Yeah. That's how I felt. I was like, no way you could do this on your own. Like, some of them have street smarts, just no brain, or it's one or the other they have. And we don't have any magic, but this guy does. We have to go with him because he has the expert. They have to go to Tiberius and Caliph because they have more expertise in this.
Right.
Vax and Vex would be like, still stuck way, way behind when they would get that far.
And they show true, like, even what limited time this actually goes through in this book, they really show good personality stuff, especially from Vax and Vex, because they got a whole huge backstory that's super complicated that they eventually go through in the campaign, but they do enough to show in here about their banter back and forth of their twins.
Yeah.
And sometimes Vax wants to be a little more honorable. Sometimes Vex is just there because they need to make their few pieces of coin and get the heck out.
Yeah. Vex is like, is this worth the coin?
Right. They're not making enough to survive. It's really
good people.
It's really, really good. And again, me as watching the show and taking into account that I think the show for the first season lasted like 3 to 4 years long. I mean, that's how long it was. And as I'm reading, I'm legitimately hearing the voice actors' voices as I'm reading the comic.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
as I'm reading the
I did as
characters.
well.
And I mean,
Yeah.
it's like it's impossible not to. As I'm, as I'm listening to the Keyleth, I'm hearing Mersha. As I'm listening to, as I'm reading like Vax, I hear Liam. You know, like it's so good. And the it's just a really good story. It is.
Right. So, like we were talking about earlier, like you've been following the show since the beginning, and I've been following just casually. I would say you do not have to know anything to read this book.
You do not.
You can just pick this book up.
Yep.
And read it for what it is. And if you want to know more, you could follow their live streaming video podcast.
Right. So.
And you could totally pick it up.
That's a really good point. So part of our group that we have for the Nerdy Playbook, I think, is all watched the show at different ways. I'm the one who's watched it, not necessarily exactly from the beginning. I was introduced to it probably about when they were halfway through the first season, so I was catching up. And then you yourself was introduced a lot later.
About like I was in the Mighty Nine. I think I gravitated that more.
Yeah,
because it was fresh starting when I came into it, and then I kind of went seeing what this was, and I was like, oh, okay, what's this? All right, kind of figured that a little bit, and then I went back.
Same thing as our friend Corey, who's also part of the group, is she decided, because it was already in Mighty Nine time when we introduced her to this, she decided to watch all of Mighty Nine up to where it is now, and then go back to Vox Machina. Yeah. So this is not one of those things where it says, okay, well, if I want to read this book, I got to watch all of the first campaign, then all second campaign, then go back to this. You really don't. Like, you can read this book, and if you don't even want to watch the show, you don't have to. Like, this book is, they got a third issue. I think it just came out. That just was.
Yeah,
released.
Series 3 was starting to get print, I believe. End of last year, they were starting issues.
Like, obviously, this is only going to go so far before they eventually link up to the show. But this is also a thing that if I understand that watching a D&D campaign isn't for everyone. If it was, we'd have a lot more followers. But the watching D&D is not for everyone, so Critical Role is not going to hit everybody's base. But this is a good way to let you at least experience what those people experience. And, because the eventual show because they got so popular, they actually have their own show that's going to come out on Amazon sometime. And this is a good way that if you ever want to watch just the show, which is actually going to be like a true, what I can sense is like a kind of a more of an anime style of their journey, and you want to eventually watch that, this is a good book to at least let you understand the characters.
I think if you like this and want to jump in, and then you're kind of ready for that series that comes out, cool. If you just want to do it the other way and just wait for the series and kind of want just a little taste, this is cool too.
Yep. Like,
this book was only like a $40 book, and you can get this like cheaper for $30 too.
Yeah.
It's pretty affordable.
Yeah, I mean it's a really good book, and obviously I think it could hit everybody on every kind of level. If you occasionally will read a comic book, I think there's something for any kind of comic book reader that's in this. Whether you want that kind of middle-aged kind of style of a comic book, or you just want to kind of have, I wouldn't really call it Adventure Sense, but it's, you got different groups that are each doing their own thing, and they decide to do their major team up to kind of do something like that. It's pretty cool. It has good comedy. It has some good drama in it. It's a very, very good story, and worst case scenario, you might have spent maybe $30 on a book that you didn't enjoy completely, but it's if I remember right, it's actually Dark Horse Comics that actually does it. Yeah. And Dark Horse Comics, they never fail on having good stories. So it's
art's beautiful. It like the art only changes like a little bit in season or in book 2.
Yep.
It only changes just slightly because they were like, oh, we had good art, we had really good concepts, and it's fine, but we can get a little more detailed with it.
Yeah.
And that's how kind of Olivia Sampson approached that.
Yeah, and but that's not uncommon in comics, because comics a lot of times they switch artists or they switch art styles every time they switch to like a new.
I hope they keep the same artist, just because it will, as a whole, it'll look very consistent and really well done.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
think the
definitely.
writers, as long as I think these two did a really good job. Like, yeah, could you get somebody else? Cool, but you still have to find that right writer that captures their voice
Sure.
of all the actors and everything, and keeps it consistent. Because if you do too many major changes and use that, then it'll just kind of take away from what you did. So I really hope they continue with this. And I could see like if Matt just went like, hey, I want to write a comic, and I teamed up with these guys, and they're like, hey, let's do something cool, and just completely off the different from this, like a one-off or a one-shot
Sure.
you wanted to do, and just write that. I think they could do that.
Sure. Yeah. Like it's. I think this is a good way of getting people into maybe just trying to, watch maybe an episode. This is a good this is a good way for people to want to watch their show, to kind of get them into it.
Yeah.
What was I thinking that? Like, and not to be really driving this down. Again, I understand it's not for everybody, but it's one of those things that you can read this, and I can guarantee that when you read this, you're gonna at least want to, at the bare minimum, Google like the history of Vox Machina, so you can at least understand where the characters and stuff like that. The writers in this, at the bare minimum, did a very good job of keeping things a mystery. So if you don't actually know anything more than this book, you're going to be asking a lot of questions in your head about, like, well, where do they go from here? What are they going to do? You're going to be really biting at the bit trying to figure it out. Yeah.
I was kind of like that.
Yeah. So, it's a D&D story done very, very well. And I just don't know much more to say than it's just a very, very good book. And if you want just something to read, it's not a hard read. It's a very easy read.
Yep.
They do a very.
I would give it to like under like a 15-year-old or 13-year-old, depending on the maturity, because there is some swearing in this book.
There is.
It's not super dark.
Right.
But there's some swearing in it. I'm like, oh, I don't want to give my child.
I mean, it is swords and magic, so it does have blood and gore.
Yeah.
Obviously, it is a comic,
it's a bit of an anime style. It's an animated style, cartoony style.
Right.
Still.
But it's. I mean, I would also go on a learning curve. I'd probably say also, too, as far as a reading curve for a comic, it is an easy read, but I'd probably say that you wouldn't give it to a kid to read because it might be a little bit difficult to kind of read a bunch of stuff in there. But as far as if you were at least a teenager and you want a good comic to read, it's a very easy read. They make it very...
Yeah.
They do not complicate any of the scenes where sometimes you can read a comic and you got to actually... Sometimes they can confuse the bubbles and you think, oh crap, I read that in the wrong order or something like that. There's no problems with that in this. They keep it very simple, very plain.
Yep. Good pacing.
Yeah.
And if you play Dungeons and Dragons and you haven't really experienced Critical Role and you just want to pick this up, you can.
Yep.
And have no prior knowledge. And if you just have that D&D base and you're like, oh, it's cool, it's inspired by a D&D experience or D&D campaign, I should say. And that's what this is.
And as a tangent off of that, to explain like why this is so good is because Critical Role, yes, they got very popular of being D&D, but the reason why they got popular from being D&D is because they do a really good job of creating these backstories to characters and all these stories that happen in there that have cool chemistry. That is like, I can make it 2 sessions that are 6 hours without any combat because they have really cool back and forth talk and all these cool things that they find, and that's what gets thrown in here. Granted, if you're reading a comic, you're going to probably want some sword scenes and some blood and gore a little bit here or there, but 50% of it, you're really enjoying it because of the back and forth banter. More times than not, when you're actually reading the parts with Vax and Vex, I'm enjoying actually the parts where they're talking back and forth and they're having their brotherly sisterly banter back and forth more than the daggers and the bow.
Sure.
Scanlan,
I do appreciate Grog and Scanlan. They have perfect chemistry.
Yep.
And they're always getting into mischief. They're always like, oh, what's the most ridiculous thing we can do?
Yep.
Oh, we'll go rob from the lich, or we're gonna kill this frog.
Right.
This frog that's really like this deity, and we just upset the balance, and yeah.
I mean, just like, for example, like, if anybody doesn't know the characters, Grog, he's supposed to, for, if you would know the system of D&D, he's a Goliath that he decided to make, like, a deficiency in intelligence, so he could have, like, a lot of strength and stuff like that. So he plays that with his character, that his character is not the sharpest tool in the shed. That'd be Grog. And so he plays okay. in the campaign. He's a big, strong character that has a big heart, but he's he's not the sharpest blade. Like it's just not the way that it is. So they do a really good job as far as the comedy factor in here, without kind of poking fun at him too much. Like, they're doing a really good job of not making fun of him, but just kind of making you enjoy his character, that he is a fun, lovable, big,
he's a big
broody
character.
Yeah, and they do a really good job of that, because that's how Travis Willingham plays him in Vox Machina, is that he's this big, huge Goliath that has as equal of big as of a heart. The only thing is that he's just a little bit out of the knowledge base, but he plays that very well, where you're not poking fun at him, you're just kind of like laughing with him, and they do a really good job of not going over the top with that in here. They do it exactly the way it's supposed to be. So yeah, it's really good.
Authentic without being authentic at the same time. It's like just very inspired, and taking all that everything they learned and from the show and kind of putting it together.
Yep.
So
so
definitely recommend picking up this book. We had a really fun time reading it.
Yep.
I would say it's easy 10 out of 10 read. It's really good. I don't know. I guess the only thing maybe I'd just improve upon is just I wish there was more story. Yeah, maybe a little more action here and there. But that's a mini gripe.
Right.
I can't wait to read more.
Yeah, definitely. I know that you can find this book at where you can buy any books or comics that are sold. So any comic book shop, you should be able to find it. Amazon, any kind of bookstore, you should be able to find it. Since the beginning of the show, apparently some of the audio was muted. We're just going to go through a couple more things. Since we were talking D&D, we do our own D&D campaign once a week. So if you want to check out our D&D campaign that we do, which we have a lot of fun, comedy, and good action, we do have that, which is our group, the Tease Revenge. So check that out. We do have recent episodes on our Twitch account, which is Rated M from Manny. That's my Twitch account. And then they eventually get posted onto our YouTube account to stay there permanently on the Nerdy Playbook. So you can follow us on the Nerdy Playbook and then watch the previous episodes. A couple things we missed was we have a schedule throughout the weeks now. So if you want to catch us most days of the week, with the exception maybe weekends, we will do something, whether it's just me or myself and Andrew or the group of us. We'll do something, whether it's video game streaming, which is usually Dead by Daylight, stuff like this. I know Andrew and I have some more stuff coming up. We want to do like a top 10 anime. We got a kind of a cool little twist of something of like the top 5 movies that we love that you probably never heard of, kind of a thing. So we're going to do a couple just kind of weird nerd talk reviews of just kind of, he does his podcast that goes through comics. This is our side's going to be more of just a random talk and then just kind of a back and forth kind of a thing. Other than that, you can follow us on Twitch. Check out our streams. All our streams are usually about 6:30 p.m. on weekdays. Give us a follow if you already haven't. We'd love for you guys to follow us and check our streams live. Otherwise, again, they will be posted on YouTube later on. Anything you have left before we end the stream for the night?
No, I guess if you like art and you're already you've read this book and you're looking for more besides watching the stream, they did come out with an art book.
Oh, that's right.
For the Mighty Nine.
For Mighty Nine.
This is a very pretty book. This is not a comic book. This is mostly just art and the world of it.
I didn't know you had that. That's cool. So
yes.
I guess it does bring up one last thing. So if you are planning to get into the stream, their stream, beautiful. It is all in the same story essentially, but you can watch Mighty Nine, which is essentially campaign 2, without needing to watch Vox Machina if you don't want to, which is season 1. But it is a sequel essentially with new characters. Not so much so that if you didn't see the first season, you would be totally confused. So, I think, I know you can check out their store, Critical Role store. They have a bunch of their books on there too, and a bunch of merchandise. But thank you all for joining us. I know we're gonna
This has been the Nerdy Playbook.
The Nerdy Playbook. That's right. And check us out for more stuff later on. We'll see you all later. Be safe and have a happy Wednesday night. See ya.
Yep. See ya.